An ominous tapping sound echoes through a darkened house in the occupied Dutch city of Zwolle. Leaving his young family huddled together inside, the owner nervously opens the back door a tiny fraction, nervously expecting one of the German troops who've been terrorizing these streets for months. Suddenly, he's knocked flying by a terrifying figure, armed to the teeth, wearing a field jacket, caked in mud, with an eye patch over one eye and a rabid stare in the other. The mother hugs her sobbing children tightly, preparing for the worst. But when the stranger rips off his muddy field jacket, it's revealed he is no German. And as he unfolds a curious map on the table, the family realizes with mounting horror what he actually intends to do. Born on January 23, 1921, Leo Major grew up during the Great Depression in Montreal's tough working-class neighborhoods, where the young French-Canadian endured a harsh relationship with his father that left deep scars. At just 14, the situation became so unbearable that Major left home and moved in with his aunt, determined to forge his own path. When limited job opportunities and his father's continued disapproval weighed on him, Major made a decision. In 1940, at age 19, he enlisted in the Canadian Army, specifically choosing the Régiment de la Chaudière. His motivation was simple but powerful. He wanted to become, quote, somebody to be proud of. For the next 4 years, Major endured the grinding routine of military training and preparation. Described by his fellow recruits as sociable, happy-go-lucky, and fearless, he honed his skills as a scout and sniper, developing the fieldcraft and marksmanship that would later make him a legend. But like thousands of other Canadian soldiers, he waited impatiently for his chance to prove himself in combat while the war raged across Europe. That chance finally came on June 6, 1944, when he landed on Juno Beach as part of the D-Day invasion, immediately thrust into the chaos and carnage of the Normandy landings. During a reconnaissance mission on that first day, Major spotted a German half-track and made a split-second decision that would establish his reputation. Charging the vehicle single-handedly, he took out the entire crew and captured their ride. But this wasn't just any ordinary enemy transport. The half-track contained crucial German radio equipment and secret codes. When Major delivered his prize to Allied intelligence officers, they were astounded by the find, which would allow them to intercept German communications and give them the ability to decipher enemy messages throughout the crucial early days of the Normandy campaign. The young Canadian had only entered combat a few hours previously, and he had already potentially saved countless Allied lives. However, a few days later, Major's aggressive tactics caught up with him during an encounter with an SS patrol. He eliminated 4 enemy soldiers, but one managed to ignite a phosphorus grenade before drawing his last breath. The explosion covered Major in burning chemicals, costing him the sight in his right eye and leaving him scarred for life. When medical officers informed him that his war was over and he would be sent home, Major flatly refused. With characteristic defiance, he declared, quote, "No, it's not over. I'm a sniper. I only need one eye to sight my rifle." From that moment forward, he would fight wearing an eye patch, earning him the nickname that would strike fear into the heart of the enemy, the One-Eyed Ghost. His superiors, recognizing both his skill and his determination, allowed him to remain with the unit. Major had already proven his worth, but greater challenges lay ahead. By late 1944, Major had established himself as one of the Canadian Army's most effective and unpredictable soldiers, and one who wasn't afraid to take on the enemy by himself. His reputation for lone wolf operations reached its peak during the Battle of the Scheldt in the Netherlands. Major and his best friend, Corporal Wilfred Willie Arsenault, were assigned to investigate the fates of an entire company of Canadian recruits who had vanished after being sent to capture a strategic town. When Arsenault fell ill, Major characteristically decided to complete the mission alone. Discovering the missing company's abandoned equipment scattered throughout the area, Major realized they had likely been captured. But he wasn't content to simply report back. Taking shelter from the rain in an abandoned house, he spotted 2 German soldiers walking along a nearby dike. In a display of tactical brilliance that would become his trademark, Major captured the first German and used him as bait to lure in the second. Then, without displaying an ounce of fear, Major marched his 2 prisoners directly to their commanding officer and calmly informed the stunned German commander that he was surrounded. Whether through sheer audacity, psychological warfare, or the officer's assumption that Major represented a much larger force, the impossible happened. The entire German company, nearly 100 men, surrendered to a single Canadian private. The victory quickly turned chaotic when nearby SS troops, witnessing their comrade's surrender, opened fire on the prisoners and their lone captor. The friendly fire claimed the lives of 7 Germans and wounded several others. Major, displaying ice-cold composure, was undeterred. He continued escorting his surviving 93 prisoners back to Canadian lines. He even ordered a passing Canadian tank to suppress the SS position that had attacked them. It's been said that for this incredible feat, Major was recommended the Distinguished Conduct Medal, second only to the Victoria Cross in the British Empire's military honor system for enlisted men. Yet he shockingly refused the honor, as it would be presented by the British General Bernard Montgomery, whom Major considered incompetent and blamed for prolonging Dutch suffering during the previous winter's failed Operation Market Garden. Nevertheless, some historians doubt the veracity of Major's recommendation, claiming that no written record of it has emerged. Whatever the case, Major's bravery and determination is in little doubt, something he would prove time and time again in the following months. In February 1945, Major found himself helping a military chaplain retrieve lifeless German soldiers from a destroyed Tiger II tank in a Universal carrier. Suddenly, the vehicle hit a landmine, the explosion instantly claiming the lives of both the chaplain and the driver. Major was not much better off. He had a broken spine in 3 places, 4 broken ribs, and shattered both his ankles. His medics rushed him to a field hospital 30 miles away, stopping every 15 minutes to inject morphine for his excruciating pain. Doctors delivered their verdict. Major's war was over. But the one-eyed ghost had other plans. After a week of recovery, he escaped the hospital in the middle of the night. He spent a month recuperating with a Dutch family, technically going AWOL. When he finally returned to his unit in March 1945, his superiors were so impressed by his determination that no disciplinary action was taken. The following month, Major and the rest of the Regiment de la Chaudière advanced on Zwolle, a Dutch city of around 50,000 inhabitants, which intelligence suggested was heavily defended by German forces. On the evening of April 13th, the unit's commanders announced that they were looking for 2 volunteers to scout the German positions, contact the Dutch resistance, and report back before the planned Allied artillery bombardment. However, they made it clear that anyone who went would stand little chance of making it back alive. When nobody else stepped forward, despite still suffering with his back injury, Major agreed to carry out the highly dangerous mission. Willie Arsenault, determined not to leave his friend to face his fate alone again, offered to go with him. As they prepared to set off, their comrades were visibly saddened, believing they would never see the 2 men again. Yet Major remained upbeat, telling them, quote, "Don't worry, boys. We will liberate that city." That evening, Major and Arsenault entered a farmhouse where they found the farmer, Henrik von Gerner, hiding in the cellar with his wife. Even after successfully convincing the frightened couple that they were not Germans, the language barrier prevented the Canadians from gleaning much useful information. As night fell, they left the farmhouse and moved toward the city, but Major noticed Arsenault's hands trembling as he held his rifle. Realizing his comrade was suffering from battle fatigue, Major told Arsenault that he could wait for him there while he entered the city alone. But Arsenault refused, telling Major that they would stick together until the end. Around 11 p.m., the pair came to a railway line. Major crossed first, making it to a roadside some distance away. Arsenault followed, but the sound of his grenades knocking against one another in his sack revealed his position. He was caught by German machine gun fire from a nearby roadblock, perishing instantly. Major was gripped by remorse, later saying, quote, "I was very mad at the Germans, but also at myself for letting him come with me. I always felt sorry for the mistake I made there." But now he had no time for regrets. He quickly dispatched 2 of Arsenault's attackers, causing the rest to run away. He then had to decide what to do next. He was now alone, facing a garrison reported to hold over 1,000 German soldiers. Though perhaps the more rational option would have been to retreat and call for the artillery barrage, the one-eyed ghost was out for revenge. He explained, quote, "I had one fixed idea. It was to liberate Zwolle, no matter what I was going to meet in the streets. 1,000 Germans or much less. I didn't care. My heart was boiling, but I was full of energy." After retrieving Arsenault's pistol and grenades, he found a nearby park, where he sat and began hatching an audacious plan. After entering Zwolle through the ancient Zassenport gate, Major began knocking on the back doors of houses, hoping he could find a safe place where he could more easily study his large map of the city. After being turned away by several scared locals, he eventually had no option but to force himself into a family's home. Mistaking him for a German, the young couple and their children were understandably terrified, but when he removed his jacket, they could see his Canadian uniform. He later said, quote, "It was like magic, those shoulder patches. To see them smile, I knew I'd make new friends." After checking his map, Major left the house to begin his one-man campaign of psychological warfare against the occupying Germans. It's believed that soon afterwards, he encountered a stroke of luck that would prove crucial to his success. Outside a local tavern, he allegedly captured the driver of a German staff car and went inside to confront the officer who was drinking within. To Major's surprise, the German officer spoke French, allowing the French-Canadian soldier to communicate directly with his enemy. Through their conversation, Major learned that the officer was from the border region of Alsace-Lorraine, which was known to have little loyalty to Hitler's cause. Sensing an opportunity to take advantage of the situation, Major reportedly informed the officer that he was part of an advance party, carefully avoiding any mention that he was completely alone. In French, he calmly explained that he thought Zwolle was a lovely town and that he would hate for it to be destroyed, especially as the war was almost over anyway. In a remarkable gamble, Major then gave the officer his weapon back and released him, hoping the message would spread fear throughout the German ranks. Major is then said to have made contact with Dutch resistance leader Fritz Kuipers, who provided him with crucial intelligence about German positions throughout the city. Armed with this knowledge, the eyepatch sporting private reportedly embarked on a methodical campaign of destruction and deception, designed to convince the Germans they were facing a much larger force. Moving through the darkened streets like a ghost, Major allegedly spent the next few hours engaging patrols whenever he could, and setting off grenades where they would make noise but do little damage. The climax of his rampage reportedly came when Major located the local SS headquarters. Bursting through the doors, he's said to have engaged 4 high-ranking SS officers in a fierce firefight, eliminating all 4 of them before they could raise an alarm. Not content with this tactical victory, it's believed that Major then set fire to the Gestapo headquarters, destroying crucial Nazi documents and sending flames shooting into the night sky. Throughout his 6-hour campaign of terror, Major reportedly captured dozens of German soldiers who, convinced they were facing an entire Canadian regiment, surrendered without significant resistance. Though some have argued over the exact details of what happened that night, there's no dispute that by dawn on April 14th, a demoralized German garrison had abandoned their supposedly impregnable positions and fled the city entirely. With the help of 4 locals and a commandeered German staff car, able to return to the site where Arsenault had fallen and transport his friend's body back to base. Upon arrival, he broke the news of what had happened to Colonel Takrau, the unit's leader, telling him, quote, "You may bring in the unit on parade. The city is completely liberated." The planned Allied artillery bombardment was cancelled, and the Regiment de la Chaudière marched into the city without firing a single shot. For his actions at Zwolle, Major was once again recommended for the Distinguished Conduct Medal. This time, he accepted the honor, as it came from his own Canadian commanders, rather than General Montgomery.
Today is Victory in Europe Day. Long live the cause of freedom.
Just over 3 weeks later, the war in Europe was over. Major returned to Montreal and his old job as a pipe fitter. He got a back operation to help him recover from his war wounds and settled into what seemed to be a quiet civilian life, apparently content to leave his military exploits in the past. But when the Korean War erupted in 1950, the call to serve his country once again proved irresistible. This time, Major's reputation preceded him. Lieutenant Colonel Jacques Dextraz, a former World War II veteran, tasked with forming the 2nd Battalion of the Royal 22E Regiment, was given free rein to handpick experienced soldiers through a network of former officers. Major's name was among the first on his list. By late spring 1951, Major found himself back in his element as part of the Scout and Sniper Platoon, an elite unit composed of what one officer described as, quote, individualist in their nature, and indeed tough. Tough in the sense of endurance. All of them could live on a bottle of water and a couple of slices of bacon, at times out in no man's land for days. At 30 years old, the one-eyed veteran was exactly where he belonged, the frozen mountains of Korea, facing the enemy under brutal conditions. In November 1951, Major would prove that his legendary skills had not diminished with age. The strategic Hill 355, nicknamed Little Gibraltar, commanded a 20-mile view of the surrounding terrain and had fallen to a massive Chinese assault. As truce talks dragged on at Panmunjom, both sides knew that whoever controlled the high ground when the ceasefire was signed would hold a crucial advantage. The situation was desperate. Major's unit, the R-22ER, held an awkward position on the extreme right flank, with D Company practically surrounded after the Chinese captured both Hill 355 and nearby Hill 227. Lieutenant Colonel Dextraz issued a stark order, quote, no withdrawal, no platoons overrun, and no panics. Major knew the coming battle would test every skill he had learned in 2 wars. On November 22nd, the Chinese 64th Army opened with a massive artillery barrage. For the next 2 days, Major watched as desperate fighting raged around him. By 6:20 p.m. on November 24th, the situation had become critical. Number 11 platoon had been overrun, and the remainder of D Company was under attack from all directions. Dextraz turned to his most reliable weapon, Major in the Scout Platoon. As the one-eyed veteran prepared his 18-man assault team, he knew the odds were extremely grim. It would be attacking uphill against entrenched positions held by thousands of Chinese soldiers. But Major had built his reputation on accomplishing the impossible. If anyone could carry out this daring assault, it was him. At midnight, Major led his men into the snow-swept darkness, each soldier wearing running shoes to muffle their footsteps. Moving in small groups along an indirect route, they approached Hull 227 from behind enemy lines, a tactical gamble that would position them in the heart of the Chinese force. Once near the summit, Major gave the signal. His men opened fire simultaneously, and the Chinese, suddenly under attack from what they thought was the heart of their own position, panicked. Within 45 minutes, Major's small force had captured the hill. But the victory was short-lived. An hour later, the full fury of the Chinese counterattack descended upon Major's position. Elements of 2 full divisions, approximately 14,000 men, launched a massive coordinated assault to retake Hill 227. The night erupted in gunfire and explosions as wave after wave of Chinese soldiers charged up the slopes. Yet when Lieutenant Colonel Dextraz ordered Major to withdraw, he characteristically refused, declaring, quote, I'm not pulling back. Instead, Major repositioned his men just 25 yards to the east, finding what little cover existed in a collection of shell holes and rocky outcroppings. From this precarious position, he would make his stand. As Chinese forces swarmed his position, Major called for motor support. His demand shocked even experienced artillery officers. Captain Charlie Forbes, commanding the motor platoon, later wrote that Major was, quote, an audacious man, not satisfied with the proximity of my barrage and asked to bring it closer. In effect, my barrage falls so close that I hear my bombs explode when he speaks to me on the radio. Throughout the bitter cold night, Major directed the defensive fire with precision. He sprinted from one crisis point to another under heavy enemy fire, rallying his men and adjusting the supporting fire. The mortars fired so rapidly and continuously that Forbes had to increase the rate until the barrels glowed red-hot from the heat, eventually warping the tubes beyond use. For 3 hellish days and nights, Major's small force held their impossible position, repulsing 4 separate major Chinese assaults. His men, inspired by his calm leadership under overwhelming odds, refused to break, despite facing enemy forces that outnumbered them nearly 800 to 1. By dawn of the final day, Major reported grimly to headquarters, quote, nothing is left there to occupy. Not a bunker or slit trench. The hill had been blasted into moonscape, but it remained in Canadian hands. On November 27th, when the ceasefire agreement was finally reached, Major's counterattack had ended what Captain Forbes called the Epic of Hill 355. The Chinese had failed to achieve their objective, and the front lines were frozen where they stood. For this extraordinary display of leadership and courage, Major received the bar to his Distinguished Conduct Medal, making him the only Canadian soldier to receive his DCM in 2 separate wars. The citation concluded, quote, "Against a force superior in number, Corporal Major simply refused to give ground. His personal courage and leadership were beyond praise." After Korea, Major returned to civilian life in Montreal, working as a pipe fitter and raising 4 children with his wife, Pauline. True to his modest nature, he rarely spoke of his wartime exploits. His own family had little idea of his legendary status until 1975, when Dutch officials arrived at their doorstep to express their nation's gratitude. His son, Daniel Almay, then 9 years old, remembered asking his mother why his father had never mentioned liberating an entire city. Major's response was typically humble. He didn't think anyone would believe him anyway. Daniel Almay recalled that his father shrugged off any suggestions that he was a hero, simply saying, quote, "I was crazy, and everything turned out good." But the people of Zwolle have never forgotten their liberator. They've named a street in his honor and teach his story in their schools. Zwolle's former mayor, Henk-Jan Meyer, has said, quote, "For us as a city, it's very important that our children still remember that it's not easy to be free, that it's vulnerable, but you always have to think about that." When Major passed away at natural causes on October 12, 2008, at the age of 87, several Dutch nationals traveled across the ocean to attend his funeral in Quebec. Today, Major's legacy endures as a symbol of courage, determination, and the extraordinary things ordinary people can accomplish when driven by duty and principle. Canada Post honored him with a commemorative stamp in 2020, calling him the One-Eyed Ghost.